Have you ever been treated like you're not good enough? By your own family? Just because of your job. I'm a licensed HVAC technician. I own my own shop, I pay my taxes, I work hard. And for the last 4 years, I've been secretly paying my younger sister's college tuition, every last dime of it. No complaints, no thanks needed. I did it because I believed in her. But then came Thanksgiving. 3 days before the holiday, I got a call from my mother. Not to ask what pie I was bringing, but to uninvite me. She said, "It's going to be a more formal dinner this year. Sarah Beth's boyfriend is bringing his family. Maybe it's best if you sit this one out." Why? Because I'm just an AC tech. I sat there stunned, humiliated, until I got a text from my cousin confirming the real reason my sister didn't want her boyfriend's wealthy parents to think she came from a working-class family. That's when it hit me. She was happy to take my money, but too ashamed to sit across from me at the dinner table. So I made a choice. I logged into the university portal. Tuition balance $21 to $500, due in 2 weeks. I deleted my payment method, closed the laptop, and walked away. But what happened next? The panic, the breakdown, the calls, the lies exposed. She thought I was beneath her, until the bills came due. And by the end of this story, you'll see exactly how fast someone's perfect life can collapse when they bite the hand that feeds them. Stay with me. This is one you won't forget. Lauren Callahan was 39 years old and had built her HVAC business from the ground up. What started as a one-woman repair service out of the back of a rusted pickup truck had grown into a respected small business serving residential clients across Portland. She wasn't flashy, but she was reliable. She paid her taxes, gave bonuses to her employees, and had spent the last 4 years quietly supporting her younger sister Sarah Beth through law school, paying every tuition bill, every book fee, every rent check. She didn't broadcast it. She never asked for anything in return. She just believed that family helped each other. That belief had gotten her through more holidays than she could count, especially Thanksgiving. It had always been Lauren's favorite. The food, the time off work, the warmth of a family meal. This year felt especially meaningful. For the first time in months, she had finally taken a few days off. She'd scheduled everything in advance: service calls, covered clients, notified bonuses sealed in envelopes. She even picked out a nice bottle of Pinot Noir to bring to dinner. For once, she looked forward to arriving with her hands free, not carrying tools or invoices, but just being a sister. Just being Lauren. Then her phone rang. She saw her mother's name on the screen, Margaret. The timing made sense. Margaret usually called a few days before Thanksgiving to talk about food or confirm the time. Lauren smiled, expecting to hear something about whether she should bring pecan or pumpkin pie this year. But the second she answered, she knew something was off. Margaret's tone wasn't her usual clipped cheerfulness. Instead, it was hesitant. Cautious. "Hi, honey," her mother said with a pause that was just long enough to send a shiver down Lauren's spine. "I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving." Lauren instinctively slowed her pace. She had been walking toward the front of her shop, keys in hand. "Okay. What's going on?" There was another pause, longer this time. "Well," Margaret said, "Colin's parents are coming into town, and Sarah Beth wants to make a good impression." Lauren blinked, unsure what that had to do with her. "Right, so it's just that this year might be a little more formal than usual, and given everything—" Her voice trailed off again. Lauren stood frozen. "Are you saying you don't want me to come?" "It's not that we don't want you there," Margaret replied quickly, too quickly. "It's just, Sarah Beth was thinking it might be best if it was just immediate family this year. Something simple. You know how these things go." Lauren's voice was low even. "I am immediate family." "Of course you are," her mother rushed to say. "But you know how these things can be with people like Colin's parents. First impressions, careers. They come from a very professional background." Lauren felt her heart thud in her chest, slow and heavy. "And I'm not professional enough." That's not what I said. No, Lauren replied. But it's what you meant. She ended the call not long after that. Margaret tried to soften it with offers to do brunch the following week, but Lauren barely heard her. Her ears were ringing. She sat in her truck staring out the windshield at nothing in particular, her wine bottle still sitting on the passenger seat. Maybe she had misheard. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe... Then her phone buzzed again. A text from her cousin Ginny. Lauren hesitated before opening it. I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, Ginny had written, but I think you should know. I overheard Sarah Beth talking to Aunt Margaret. She said she didn't want Colin to find out you're an HVAC tech. Said she didn't want to look like she came from a working-class background. Lauren read the message twice. There it was. No room for interpretation. No misunderstanding. Not only had she been uninvited, she had been erased. The woman who had spent years paying every tuition invoice, every late-night Uber ride, every overpriced textbook, had just been shoved out of the family gathering like some embarrassing cousin from the wrong side of the tracks. And why? Because she worked with her hands. Because she fixed things for a living. Because she didn't wear a suit or have a degree hanging on her office wall. She thought about the times Sarah Beth had forgotten to introduce her at college events. The times she'd brushed past Lauren's career with vague words like, she runs her own business. Now it all made sense. Lauren had been tolerated, not respected. Useful, not valued. She looked at her wine bottle. She had bought it with pride, excited to bring something nice to the table. Now it sat there like a silent witness to the truth her place at that table had never been secure. It had been borrowed conditional. But something shifted in her that evening. Not just sadness, not just anger. A slow, rising clarity. This wasn't just about a dinner invitation. It was about respect. Or the absence of it. And she had given enough without it. Lauren didn't speak to anyone that Thanksgiving. She didn't answer calls, didn't return messages. She turned off her work phone, set her personal cell on silent, and sat on her couch with a reheated frozen meal and a bottle of the wine she'd originally picked out for dinner with her family. The bottle sat unopened for hours as the daylight faded into a soft gray and the city outside grew quiet. It was her first Thanksgiving spent completely alone. And though the silence was heavy, it was also strangely clarifying. She had always imagined that if something like this ever happened, she'd be furious. That she'd punch a wall, scream, cry, throw something. But the truth was worse than rage. She felt hollow, like a piece of her had been carefully carved out and discarded. She had never been someone who needed praise. She didn't want a parade for helping her sister. But she'd been proud to do it. Proud that her own sweat and labor, her own calloused hands and long shifts, had bought Sarah Beth a shot at a future. A future free of student debt, of struggling to make ends meet. She thought that counted for something. She had been wrong. Sometime around 7 o'clock she opened Instagram. She didn't know why, habit maybe, or some quiet part of her still hoping this was all a misunderstanding. But as soon as the app loaded, her breath caught in her throat. There they were. The dinner table was draped in ivory linen lit with tall candles and glinting silver. Her mother's roast turkey took center stage. Bowls of mashed potatoes and green beans, wine glasses half full, laughter frozen in 1,000 megapixels. And in the middle of it all, Sarah Beth. Her sister was beaming, her arm looped through Colin's, standing beside his tall, elegant parents. She wore a form-fitting maroon dress, hair in soft curls. The caption read, "So thankful for my people. Family love and a beautiful future ahead." Lauren's name wasn't tagged. She wasn't mentioned. Not in the comments, not in the pictures, not anywhere. It was as if she had never existed. The next story made her stomach churn. A boomerang video of Sarah Beth popping open a champagne bottle, her voice high with joy. To new beginnings. Lauren's hands curled into fists without realizing it. There was no anger, no, not yet. First came the ache. The quiet, aching realization that she had been erased. That her family, especially her sister, had drawn a line and left her on the outside of it. She stared at the screen until her eyes burned, then locked her phone and set it face down. A memory surfaced uninvited. It was 3 years ago. Lauren had driven 6 hours to surprise Sarabeth at her law school mixer. She had taken the day off, something she rarely did, and brought with her a small care package gift cards, a handwritten note, and a lucky coin she'd carried since she started her business. When she arrived at the venue, Sarabeth looked stunned to see her. Not touched, not excited, just startled. "Oh, you came all this way," she had said, barely masking the discomfort. Wow." Lauren remembered the way Sarabeth kept positioning her body during conversations, always angled slightly away, always guiding Lauren to the corners of the room. She introduced her to 1 or 2 friends, never by name. Just my sister. Not my sister Lauren, not she runs a successful HVAC company. Just my sister. One of her classmates had asked, "Oh, cool, what do you do?" Lauren remembered opening her mouth, but before she could speak, Sarabeth jumped in. "She's in trades. You know, building stuff. Trades. Building stuff." That night, Lauren told herself it wasn't a big deal. Maybe Sarabeth was just nervous. Maybe she didn't want to make the night about family. She had driven home in silence. But now, sitting alone in her quiet apartment, the truth rang out louder than any excuse ever could. There had been a dozen little moments like that. The party last December where she found out through someone else's story. The way Sarabeth always deflected when their mom brought up Lauren's job. The way she never once introduced Lauren to Colin despite dating him for almost a year. Each of those moments had been pieces of a puzzle that Lauren hadn't wanted to solve. She had refused to believe that someone she loved so much, someone she had supported in silence, was ashamed of her. But now the picture was clear. She wasn't just an afterthought. She was an inconvenience. A reality Sarabeth wanted to hide. The sister who fixed air conditioners didn't fit the image Sarabeth was trying to project. And when that image was threatened, Sarabeth made a choice. She chose to erase the person who made that image possible. Lauren sat still, not moving, not speaking as the clock on the wall ticked past 9. Her untouched dinner had gone cold. The wine remained sealed. And then, as the silence wrapped tighter around her, came the breaking point. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a sob. It was a sentence. Quiet. Bitter. Final. "I paid for a future where I don't even exist." She didn't know who she was saying it to. Herself. The empty room. The ghosts of every family photo she now knew she'd never be in again. But the moment the words left her mouth, something in her cracked open, and something else began to harden. Because if she wasn't good enough to be invited to dinner, maybe, just maybe, her money wasn't good enough to pay for Sarabeth's tuition anymore. And that thought didn't just hurt. It felt like justice waiting to happen. The decision came quietly. Lauren sat at her kitchen table the next morning, the pale light of early dawn washing across the countertops. Her coffee had gone cold in her mug, untouched. The stillness in her apartment, once suffocating the night before, now felt like a shield. There was no anger in her expression, only calm, a kind of settled stillness that comes when someone has moved from heartbreak into certainty. She reached for her laptop, her fingers moving on muscle memory alone. The school's payment portal was already bookmarked, tucked neatly between job scheduling software and parts supplier invoices. She had logged into this system so many times over the past 4 years that it felt more familiar than her own banking app. The screen loaded, 1 login, 1 password, and there it was. Upcoming semester spring. Tuition due $21 or $500. Due date, 2 weeks. Lauren stared at the number, letting the weight of it settle. It was always a large sum, but she had never truly paused to think about it. Not when Sarabeth called her crying 4 years ago, heartbroken after learning she'd been denied financial aid. Lauren remembered that call clearly. Sarabeth sobbing, saying she didn't know what to do, that she couldn't afford law school, that she'd have to give up. "I'll figure it out," Lauren had said almost without thinking. And she had. She picked up extra shifts, canceled a vacation she'd planned for months, and dipped into savings meant for expanding her business. At the time, it felt noble, worthwhile. She was helping her baby sister build a future. Now, looking at that number on the screen, all Lauren could think was, she never even thanked me. She let her cursor hover over the payment method tab. Her personal bank account was listed as the primary source for automatic payments. Every month for the last 4 years, funds had gone out without a reminder. No thank you notes, no check-ins, no acknowledgement, just expectation. Lauren clicked Edit. A small pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this payment method? This action cannot be undone. Her hand didn't even tremble. She clicked Yes. There was no grand statement, no warning email, no bitter text, no dramatic announcement on social media, just a quiet severing of a cord that had once been lifeline and leash all at once. The moment she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed on the table. Her mother's name lit up the screen, Margaret Callahan. Lauren let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. By the 4th time, she finally answered, more out of exhaustion than curiosity. Lauren, her mother's voice shot through the receiver like a storm front. What are you doing? Lauren took a slow breath and leaned back in her chair. Good morning to you too, Mom. Don't be smart with me. Sarah Beth just called me hysterical. She got a notice from the school saying her tuition payment was declined. Tell me that's not true. Oh, it's true, Lauren said flatly. There was silence on the other end. Then a gasp, sharp and theatrical. Lauren, how could you be so cruel? The word cruel stuck in Lauren's throat like a splinter. Cruel. After everything. You want to talk about? Cruel, she asked quietly. How about uninviting your own daughter from Thanksgiving because she's not fancy enough to impress a boyfriend's parents? How about using someone's hard-earned money for years and pretending they don't exist? Lauren, that's not what this is about. Margaret protested, her voice slipping into the familiar rhythm of guilt and manipulation. She's just young. She doesn't always think. She's 24, Mom. She thinks just fine. She needs this degree. Her whole future depends on it. Lauren closed her eyes and pressed the tips of her fingers against her temples. So did mine. I worked nights while I built my company. I never asked for help. I never even got a pat on the back. And I still showed up for her. There was a pause and Lauren could hear her mother's voice faltering. Then came the inevitable script. You promised to help her through school. No, Lauren interrupted sharper this time. I promised to support my sister. I didn't promise to bankroll someone who's ashamed of me. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Lauren nearly laughed. Mom, she erased me. And you let her. Click. She ended the call. She didn't toss her phone across the room. She didn't scream. She just stood up, poured out the cold coffee in the sink, and turned on the faucet. By noon, the calls came flooding in. First from her mother again. Then her father. Then Sarah Beth herself. The voicemails piled up, each one a little more desperate than the last. Lauren didn't listen to them. She didn't need to. She knew what they would say. How could you do this? Your family. This isn't like you. Don't ruin her future over a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was years of disrespect disguised as silence. Years of giving, hoping that one day Sarah Beth would look at her with pride, or at the very least with decency. Now Lauren had finally done what none of them expected. She had said no, and though the fallout had only just begun for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel used. She felt free. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since the payment was canceled. Lauren knew they'd call. She just hadn't expected it to be this fast or this loud. Margaret's name flashed on the screen again. Lauren stared at it for a moment before finally answering, her voice composed, her jaw already tight. Lauren, how could you? Margaret didn't even say hello. There was no warmth, no pause for concern. Just an accusation, sharp and immediate. I assume you're calling about the tuition, Lauren said, voice flat. Margaret's tone shot up. Of course I am. Sarabeth just found out she's going to be dropped from her classes. She's hysterical. What were you thinking? Lauren's eyes narrowed as she looked out her kitchen window, watching the first light snowfall blanket her truck. I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, I've done enough. Margaret scoffed. Done enough? Are you serious? You know she needs this degree. She's worked so hard, worked hard. Lauren cut in, laughing dryly. She worked hard hiding me from her life. That's what she worked on. There was a pause, a silence that would have meant something if Lauren hadn't known better. She's your sister, Margaret finally said, now slipping into that rehearsed disappointment. Family sacrifices for each other. And what exactly has she sacrificed? Lauren asked calmly. Because from where I stand, I've been the one sacrificing. Money, time, respect, my place at the table. Margaret didn't respond directly. Instead, she pivoted with a venomous final shot. If she ends up dropping out or loses her scholarship, it'll be on you. And if we lose the house helping her, that'll be your fault too. Lauren blinked. Excuse me. You heard me, Margaret snapped. Your father and I might have to refinance everything, all because you chose this moment to pull the rug out from under her. Lauren could barely believe what she was hearing. Her own parents were blaming her again. Not once did they ask how she felt being excluded from the holiday. Not once did they ask why she made this decision. And just when she thought it couldn't cut any deeper, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Ginny, her cousin. They hadn't talked in months, but Lauren knew Ginny was close to Sarabeth. The message was short, only a few lines, but it changed everything. Hey, I didn't want to get involved, but you deserve to know. Sarabeth told Colin and his family that you passed away from cancer 2 years ago. That's why he never asked about you. He thinks you're dead. Lauren froze. The air drained from her lungs. Her hands trembled as she reread the message, thinking surely she must have misunderstood. But the words were clear, impossible to twist. Dead. To her own sister. This wasn't just shame. This wasn't about being embarrassed by a blue-collar sibling. This was erasure. Sarabeth hadn't just left her out of her new life. She had rewritten it without Lauren in it at all. And the worst part, she'd done it without blinking. Lauren sat down slowly, still gripping the phone. Her body felt heavy, like her bones were made of stone. She stared at the floor, not seeing it, not hearing anything but her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. What kind of person did this? What kind of sister? She thought of the day she signed over that first tuition payment. How Sarabeth had cried, desperate, humiliated, that financial aid had fallen through. How she had begged Lauren for help. I just need 1 semester to get on my feet, she had said. Lauren had believed her, trusted her, supported her. And now she realized while she'd been investing in Sarabeth's future, Sarabeth had been busy erasing her past. Her, Lauren. The one who worked 12-hour days in crawl spaces and attics to make sure her sister never had to work retail. The one who lived simply so Sarabeth could live comfortably. The one who until now thought maybe, just maybe, she mattered. But now she knew the truth. She didn't matter. Not to them. Not to any of them. Lauren slowly stood back up. The weight hadn't gone away, but something else replaced it. Resolve. And she knew this was just the beginning. Lauren hadn't realized how heavy the weight had been until it was gone. For years, the pressure to keep Sarabeth afloat had wrapped itself around her chest like a vice, tightening with every due date, every guilt-tripped phone call, every forced smile at family gatherings. But now, with the payment portal closed and her phone on Do Not Disturb, something unexpected settled in its place. Peace. It came slowly, not in some grand cinematic moment, but in the quiet rituals of her day. The first sign was the way she slept. Deeper. Uninterrupted. She no longer woke up at 3 a.m. in a panic about how to juggle payroll and tuition in the same week. Her morning started with coffee, not crisis. Her thoughts weren't consumed by someone else's calendar. By the end of that week, Lauren was back in her shop full-time. The HVAC business, small but reliable, had been steady for years. But now, with her energy no longer siphoned into Sarabeth's law school bills, she found herself dreaming again. She dug out the dusty folder marked expansion plans from the back of her file cabinet. She hadn't touched it since the second year of Sarabeth's undergrad. Too expensive, too risky, she'd told herself at the time. But now she opened it like a love letter to herself. A second truck. Maybe 2 new hires. A marketing push. She could finally afford to take some chances, not just survive. The numbers still had to work, but for the first time the numbers were hers alone. At the Monday morning staff meeting, her crew noticed. Harry, her senior tech, made a casual remark about how she was smiling more than usual. A younger apprentice joked that she must have won the lottery. She just shrugged, lips twitching with something dangerously close to a real grin. "It's amazing," she said, "what you can get done when you stop pouring your time and money into a black hole." They didn't press her. They didn't need to. By Thursday, she was visiting commercial properties for bids. Friday, she sat with her accountant to discuss long-term goals. It was the kind of week she hadn't had in years, not because she hadn't been capable, but because she'd been too busy living someone else's dream. And then came the storm. It started with a missed call. Sarabeth lit up her phone while she was reviewing supply costs at the distributor. Then another call. Then 3 texts in rapid succession. "Lauren, you have to call me. Why are you doing this? You're ruining my life." Lauren stared at the screen. Her heart didn't race. Her stomach didn't sink. She just felt tired. Tired of the same script. Tired of the theatrics. Tired of being the emergency contact for someone who didn't even have the decency to acknowledge her existence to her own boyfriend. Still, curiosity got the better of her. She opened the latest message. "You have no idea what you've done. I might lose everything. Are you happy now?" She locked her phone without replying. But Sarabeth wasn't done. That night, a voicemail came through. "You're seriously going to let me drop out over a dinner? Over some stupid holiday? You're petty, Lauren. I hope you know that. You just want to see me fail. You've always been jealous." "Well, congrats. You win." Lauren let the message play in the background while she folded laundry. The voice that once could manipulate her with a single quiver now sounded tinny, like a desperate recording from another life. The next day, another message. "I called financial aid. They won't help. I need you to fix this. I need you." It was the first time Sarabeth had said need without dressing it up in guilt or false sweetness. But Lauren didn't respond. She knew the cycle too well. The panic would turn to anger. The anger would turn to blame. Then the whole family would come marching in behind her. And yet, even as the messages piled up, Lauren felt something strange. She wasn't afraid of what they'd say. She wasn't bracing herself for the fallout. She had made her decision. She had set the boundary. And she wasn't crossing it again. So she went on with her weekend. She took the truck in for maintenance. She helped an elderly client whose heat had gone out unexpectedly. She took herself to dinner and sat at the bar with a book, savoring a glass of wine without worrying whether the bill would cut into Sarabeth's rent. It was in the simplest of terms, freedom. But even as peace settled in, Lauren knew one thing for sure. Sarabeth wasn't finished. She never gave up that easily. And Lauren. She was finally ready for whatever came next. Because she wasn't the same sister who had picked up the phone in tears 4 years ago, agreeing to cover 1 semester just this once. She was someone else now. Someone they couldn't control. Someone they had underestimated. And that Lauren knew was their biggest mistake. Sarabeth stood outside Colin's apartment building, her eyes swollen from crying, her fingers trembling as she clutched her phone. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. Her texts had gone unanswered for days, and every call went straight to voicemail. Desperation pulled her here, not pride. Not anymore. She pressed the buzzer, and after a long, tense pause, the door clicked open. She rushed in, heart-pounding, rehearsing apologies she hadn't truly believed in until now. Colin opened the door before she could knock, his expression unreadable. He stepped aside without a word. Sarabeth hesitated but entered, wiping her face quickly, trying to compose herself. "Colin, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for things to spiral like this." He closed the door slowly behind her and turned, arms crossed. "You didn't mean to lie to me for nearly 2 years?" His voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. Sarabeth swallowed hard. "I wasn't lying, just not telling the whole story." Colin blinked once. "You told me your parents were paying your tuition. They were... kind of. I mean, they helped. I called the university." He interrupted. "I spoke with the financial office. They had no record of any upcoming payments, no parental contribution. The only consistent sponsor on your account for the last 4 years was someone named Lauren Calloway." Sarabeth's stomach dropped. Her mouth opened, but she had no excuse this time. No ready-made story. Colin kept going. "You lied to me about who supported you. But that's not what really hit me. I didn't recognize the name at first. Lauren Calloway. But then it clicked. 2 years ago, when my parents' air conditioning system broke in the middle of summer, you remember that, right?" She nodded hesitantly. "A woman came by. She was professional, efficient. Fixed the whole thing in under an hour. My mom was impressed, kept talking about how rare it was to see a woman running her own HVAC business. Said she had grit. That woman was Lauren." Sarabeth's face flushed. "I didn't think it mattered." Colin stared at her, stunned. "Didn't matter? Your sister paid for your law school. She kept you out of debt. And not only did you keep her hidden from me, you told me she was dead." Her knees gave slightly, but she forced herself upright. That was just one time. I didn't know how to explain it." "You're from this world, Colin. You wouldn't understand." "My world." His voice turned icy. "You think I care about what job someone has? My grandfather was a mechanic, Sarabeth. He built everything we have today with oil-stained hands. My parents might wear suits now, but they never forgot where they came from." Sarabeth looked down, ashamed. "I was trying to protect our image. I didn't want to seem... less." "So you erased your sister, because she reminded you where you came from?" She looked up, pleading. "It wasn't like that." Colin shook his head slowly. "She's the reason you're even in this position. Every textbook, every apartment, every semester, that was Lauren. And you pretended she never existed. Told me she died of cancer." "It was just a stupid lie," Sarabeth whispered, the tears threatening again. "I didn't know it would go this far." Colin exhaled, as if trying to contain years of disappointment in a single breath. "I defended you, Sarabeth. I believed in you. And now I don't know who you are." "Please," she reached out. "Don't leave me. I can fix this." But he took a step back. "You can't fix this. Not with me." He paused, then said softly, "She was your sister. And you buried her while she was still alive." Her hand dropped to her side. He walked to the door, opened it, and stood waiting. She didn't move. "I think you should go," he said. And just like that, the illusion she had built for years crumbled. She walked out slowly, the echo of the door closing behind her louder than any argument. For the first time, Sarabeth realized she hadn't just lost her sister. She had lost herself. Lauren sat on her couch, legs curled beneath her phone face down on the coffee table. The last 24 hours had been eerily quiet. No more calls from Sarabeth, no texts, no late-night voice messages that began with guilt and ended in rage. For the first time in days, she felt the beginnings of peace returning to her chest. But she also knew better than to expect it to last. It started with her father. The phone buzzed once, twice, then a third time. The caller ID, Paul Calloway. She considered ignoring it, but something in her habit maybe made her pick up. Before she could say a word, his voice came barreling through the receiver like a storm. "Lauren, what the hell is wrong with you?" She stayed silent. "You're seriously going to let your sister drop out? You know she can't cover that tuition on her own. This is her future, Lauren. Do you understand that?" Her future Lauren closed her eyes, steadying her voice. "Did you ever stop to ask why I cut her off?" "Don't twist this," Paul snapped. We raised you better than this kind of cold-hearted cruelty." She nearly laughed. Raised her better. The same man who'd let her work double shifts in high school while her sister attended summer debate camps. The same father who had never once visited her HVAC office, not even when she opened her second location. "You didn't seem so concerned when I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving," she said calmly. "That's different," he said without hesitation. "It was a formal dinner. You know how these things go." Lauren felt something twist in her chest. Rage, maybe, or just disappointment that had grown old and brittle over the years. The line went dead. No goodbye. Just silence. Mom called next. Margaret's voice was laced with well-practiced concern, the kind that disguised manipulation as maternal worry. "I just spoke to your father," she said. "He's very upset. We all are." Lauren didn't answer. "I don't know what's gotten into you, honey. You've always been so generous, so kind. But this?" Her tone shifted slightly, the edges sharpening. "This isn't you." Lauren stared at the ceiling. "I wasn't invited to dinner, Mom." "You're still part of this family," Margaret insisted. "Am I?" she said quietly. "Because it seems like I only am when I'm paying for something." Margaret sighed heavily. "Don't say that. Sarah Beth is devastated. She told her boyfriend I was dead." Silence. Lauren's throat tightened. "Did you know that?" "She just panicked," her mother said after a beat, her voice forced. "She didn't know how to explain things. She could have told the truth." Lauren cut in. "That her sister runs a successful business, that her sister paid for everything. But that wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. You're making this into something—" "It's not," Margaret snapped. "You're overreacting." Lauren shook her head slowly. "I'm done reacting. I'm just done." She hung up. The phone buzzed again before she even set it down. Aunt Delia, Uncle Mark, Cousin Rebecca. One by one the calls and texts came flooding in. "You're tearing this family apart. She's your sister, how could you? I never thought you could be so heartless." Lauren scrolled through message after message. Not one of them asked what had happened. Not one person had reached out after Thanksgiving to ask why she wasn't there. Not one soul questioned why she, the woman who had been holding up Sarah Beth's life for years, was suddenly being accused of cruelty. She wasn't shocked, not really. But it still hurt. In all the noise, one thing became unmistakably clear to them: her worth had always been tied to her wallet. And now that she had said no, now that she had chosen herself, she had become the villain. With steady hands, she opened her settings and went to her contact list. Block, block, block. One by one, she silenced them all. The judgment, the guilt, the manufactured outrage. She wasn't angry anymore. She was done. Lauren had just finished reviewing the morning work orders when the glass door to her office swung open with a force that made the hinges rattle. Heads turned instantly. The hum of conversation and the rhythmic clicking of keyboards died in unison. Lauren's eyes snapped up from her clipboard, and her stomach sank. Sarah Beth. She looked disheveled. Her once perfectly styled hair was a mess, eyes swollen and rimmed red. She stood in the entryway, breathing heavily like she had run straight from wherever she came. In her hand was a crumpled tissue, and in the other her phone gripped like a lifeline. The silence in the office was so complete that Lauren could hear the ticking of the wall clock. "You ruined my life!" Sarah Beth shrieked, stepping forward. A low gasp escaped one of the receptionists, but no one moved. Lauren stayed still behind the counter, calm despite the chaos. "I paid your tuition," Lauren said evenly. "For 4 years. And the moment I needed you to stand by me just once, you erased me." "You don't understand," Sarah Beth cried, her voice cracking. "I was under pressure. I didn't know how to explain. I never wanted things to go this far." "But you let them," Lauren replied. "You made your choices. You told your boyfriend I was dead. You told Mom I was embarrassing. You told yourself you were better than me." The younger woman's face twisted with a storm of anger and desperation. She moved toward Lauren's desk, hand raised as if she might knock something off. But before she could so much as touch a pen holder, a voice cut across the room like a knife through silk. "That's enough." It was Harold. At 63, Harold was one of Lauren's most seasoned employees, a steady man with a booming voice and a deep well of quiet loyalty. He stepped forward, his face unreadable, but his eyes sharp. "This is a place of business," he said calmly. "Not your personal stage." Sarabeth blinked. "Excuse me." "You're trespassing," he said, "and you're disturbing both clients and staff. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm her sister," she snapped, pointing a shaky finger at Lauren. "She's abandoning me." "No," Lauren said softly, stepping from behind the desk. "I stopped enabling you. There's a difference." The room was frozen, the tension so thick it could have been cut with a knife. A few newer employees looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to move or speak. But Lauren's posture remained calm, composed, even regal. Then from the waiting area, someone slowly stood up. She was an older woman, maybe in her late 60s. Neatly dressed in a navy blazer, leather gloves tucked into one hand, her sharp gray eyes had been quietly observing the entire scene from the moment Sarabeth burst in. She stepped forward with the slow, deliberate poise of someone used to commanding rooms. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice measured and clear, "but I believe I should introduce myself." Sarabeth stared at her, still fuming. Lauren raised an eyebrow. "I'm Ruth Langford," the woman said. "Senior Facilities Manager for Langford Property Holdings. We manage over 24 residential and commercial buildings across the state." Lauren blinked, suddenly recognizing the name. Langford Holdings was one of the largest property groups in the Tri-County area. High-end contracts, long-term work, steady income. Every HVAC company in the region had tried to get a foot in their door. "I've been sitting here waiting for an estimate," Ruth continued. "But what I just saw tells me more than any bid proposal ever could." Lauren felt her chest tighten. "You kept your composure. You handled a personal ambush with restraint and dignity. That speaks volumes." And frankly, she glanced at Sarabeth, then back at Lauren. "I admire anyone who chooses self-respect over convenient silence." Lauren said nothing, her mouth slightly open. Ruth gave a small smile. "I have a list of maintenance contracts coming up for renewal. I'd like you to take a look, if you're interested, of course." Lauren nodded slowly. "I'm definitely interested." Sarabeth looked between the two women, eyes wide, lips trembling. You're rewarding her for cutting me off." Ruth turned to her with a calm, almost pitying gaze. "I'm rewarding a professional for acting like one. And you, young lady, are fortunate that all you've lost is money." Harold stepped forward again, gesturing toward the door. "It's time to go, Miss Calloway." Sarabeth let out a choked sound, something between a sob and a growl, but didn't resist. She turned and stormed out the door, slamming behind her with a final ringing crack. Silence returned. Lauren slowly exhaled. Her team began to move again, the office springing back to life as though someone had hit a reset switch. Ruth approached the desk, extending a neatly folded business card. "I'll email the details," she said. "Let's talk Monday." Lauren accepted the card with both hands. "Thank you. Really." Ruth gave her a final nod. "You've earned it." As the woman walked out, Lauren looked at Harold, who gave her a small nod of approval. She sank into her chair, not with exhaustion, but with something new. Power, control, momentum. She was no longer just surviving the storm. She was steering straight through it. Lauren had been quiet on social media for years. Aside from the occasional post about her HVAC business or sharing a birthday wish for a longtime client, she mostly stayed away from the noise. She'd never had the time or the desire to broadcast her life to people who barely knew her. But that didn't mean she was unaware of what was happening. On a cool Sunday morning, stillness filled her small home as she sipped coffee and watched the steam rise. Her phone vibrated on the counter. A message from Ginny. "You might want to see this," it read, followed by a screenshot. It was Sarabeth's latest Facebook post. No matter how strong you are being abandoned by your own family over money, it breaks something inside you. I still believe in forgiveness. I still believe in love. But wow. Some people just don't know what family means. Beneath it, hundreds of likes. Comments pouring in. You deserve better, babe. Family doesn't turn their back over a few dollars. Anyone who would do that to their own sister? Unforgivable. Lauren read it twice, jaw tight, her coffee growing cold in her hand. Of course. Sarabeth was playing the martyr. Carefully vague, emotionally manipulative, and just ambiguous enough to garner sympathy without inviting too many questions. It was a tactic she had used since they were teenagers: twist the narrative first, and people would believe it. Make herself the victim before the facts caught up. Lauren didn't respond. She didn't even react. She simply put the phone down and opened her laptop. There were estimates to review, invoices to approve, and meetings to plan. The storm outside her window didn't concern her; she had weatherproofed her life. But Ginny wasn't finished. A few hours later, another ping. "Thought you might want to see who's really buying her act," Ginny texted. Attached were screenshots from a group chat, a circle of Sarabeth's old college friends, many of whom Lauren had met briefly during those years when she was still covering her sister's rent and food bills. One message stood out. "OMG, can't believe people are falling for her post." "Right," another chimed in. "She literally told us she cut Lauren out because she didn't want to look poor. She's been talking about how she was going to guilt her sister into paying again. LeMayo, if Lauren gives in, she's a clown." Lauren stared at the screen, stone-faced. So much for remorse. She didn't know whether to laugh or feel sick. The betrayal no longer hurt, not in the way it had weeks ago. What struck her now was the sheer shamelessness, the depth of Sarabeth's manipulations, not just to her but to everyone. Even the friends who once toasted her success now whispered behind her back. And still Lauren said nothing. She didn't comment, didn't message anyone, didn't write her own vague post in return, because she didn't need to. Over the next few days, the cracks began to show. First, a former co-worker of Lauren's commented under Sarabeth's post, "Isn't your sister the one who paid your law school tuition?" The comment vanished an hour later. Then another post surfaced, this time in a local business group Lauren was part of. A small contractor named Joe shared how Lauren had helped his team during a bitter winter last year when their heating units had failed, and she'd fixed them on Christmas Eve for free. He had no idea about the family drama, but his timing was uncanny. "She's one of the most generous people I've worked with," he wrote. "If you don't know the whole story, maybe don't pick sides so fast." More people started to hesitate. More silence filled the spaces under Sarabeth's posts. And then came the quiet apologies. A few private messages to Lauren, some from distant cousins, others from old classmates. Most didn't say much, just some version of, "Hey, I didn't know the full story. Hope you're okay." Lauren didn't respond to them either, because she wasn't interested in being vindicated online. She didn't need likes to validate what she knew in her bones. She had kept someone afloat for years. She had paid for a future that refused to acknowledge her. And now the truth was doing what it always does when given time. It was rising to the surface. By the end of the week, Sarabeth had deleted her post. Lauren noticed but didn't celebrate. She simply brewed another pot of coffee, returned to her spreadsheets, and continued building the life that no one had handed her. The world could keep talking. She had work to do. Lauren didn't know the exact day things began to unravel for Sarabeth, but she suspected it started the moment the university's finance office hit send on their final warning email. It was only a matter of time. When the structure you've built your life on is made of other people's sacrifices, all it takes is one missing piece for the whole thing to fall apart. Sarabeth had tried. She really had. After the confrontation at Lauren's office and the mounting silence from social media, she attempted one last path, borrowing the money. She applied for student loans only to be flagged for needing a co-signer. That led her straight to Margaret and Paul. But things weren't what they used to be. The financial state of their parents' household had always been tenuous, held together more by Lauren's quiet contributions than they'd ever care to admit. Over the years, Lauren had covered small emergencies utility bills that mysteriously vanished from Paul's memory, and even sent a few checks when Margaret claimed she was short for property taxes. Nothing formal, nothing official, just helping family. But now that safety net was gone and the credit report didn't lie. Paul had missed too many payments on his business loan. Margaret's name was tied up in an unpaid line of credit from a medical expense years back. Together, their debt-to-income ratio was dismal. The bank said no. Twice. Sarabeth tried a third lender. Still no. The tuition deadline passed. And just like that, her enrollment status shifted, dropped for non-payment. Lauren only heard about it through Ginny, who texted her simply, "She's out. Officially." The next shoe dropped within days. Sarabeth had been living in a small off-campus apartment that she couldn't afford without student housing subsidies or help from Lauren. Now, with no classes and no income, she couldn't justify staying. She asked Colin's roommate if she could crash for a few weeks. He said no. She messaged a few law school acquaintances. No reply. She even reached out to Ginny, hoping for a lifeline. Ginny didn't respond. Eventually, there was only one place left. She moved back home. Lauren didn't need anyone to tell her how that went. She could imagine it perfectly. Margaret always tense when something didn't go according to her picture-perfect standards, trying to act supportive while thinly veiling her disappointment. Paul quieter than usual, alternating between muttering about entitlement and reminding anyone who'd listen that this is all Lauren's fault. The house once kept polished for show now felt tighter. No one was happy. No one could pretend anymore. And the fights started. Not loud door-slamming fights, but the kind of brittle, exhausted arguing that comes from people who feel trapped. Paul would ask what Sarabeth planned to do next. She'd shrug, say she needed space. Margaret would jump in, suggesting she apply for internships, maybe take a community college class in the meantime. Sarabeth would snap back, "What for?" She wasn't in school anymore. "What happened to that big future you kept talking about?" Paul barked one night loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Well, maybe it would still be happening if Lauren hadn't turned on me." Sarabeth snapped. Lauren's name hung in the air like a curse. Margaret's voice trembled. "Don't you dare put this all on her." Paul surprisingly didn't jump to Sarabeth's defense. "She gave you 4 years of tuition," he said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "That's more than we ever could." That stopped the conversation cold. The silence that followed said more than words could. None of them would say it out loud, but each of them knew. Lauren was never the problem. She was the solution they had taken for granted. Now that solution was gone. And the family, once so concerned with appearances and pride, had no one left to perform for. Lauren, meanwhile, was doing just fine. She spent her evenings in quiet satisfaction, finishing expansion plans, mentoring her new hires, and cooking for herself without interruptions. There were no crises to fix, no guilt calls to answer, no dinners to be excluded from. Just peace. Lauren was in the middle of reviewing vendor quotes for her newest commercial HVAC contract when she saw an envelope on her desk that hadn't been there earlier that morning. Handwritten. No return address. No stamp. Just her name in a familiar rushed scrawl she hadn't seen in months. She picked it up slowly, heart tight with something between caution and curiosity. It was from Sarabeth. She hesitated. For weeks the silence had been total. After the last explosion at her office, Sarabeth had vanished. No texts, no voicemails, no drive-by appearances, just silence. And honestly, it had been a relief. Lauren had thought that maybe, just maybe, it was over. But here it was. The final act. She sat back in her chair and opened the letter. Dear Lauren, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and I can't blame you. I said and did things that I regret more than I can put into words. I was wrong. About everything. I miss you. Things have been hard. I'm not in school anymore. Mom and Dad are struggling. I don't know what to do next. I've made a mess of everything. But if I could ask just one thing, Just one more kindness I would never ask again. I just need help paying for one last semester, that's all. Just the last piece to finish law school. I swear I'll pay you back. I just want to finish what I started. Please, Lauren. If there's any part of you that still sees me as your sister, I'm begging. Love. Sarah Beth. Lauren read the letter twice. She sat frozen, letting the words soak in. It felt different than the last few encounters. Not defensive, not manipulative. It felt real. Raw, even. And for a moment that old instinct came roaring back, the one that had kept her quietly paying, quietly sacrificing, quietly giving, while Sarah Beth took and never looked back. Lauren reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over the contacts icon. She was just about to call when a message from Ginny popped up. She opened it. Ginny. Thought you should see this before you do anything stupid. Attached was a screenshot from a group chat. Sarah Beth's friends, the ones Lauren had never met, never been introduced to. The message was from Sarah Beth just 3 hours ago. Sarah Beth. LOL, if she's still dumb enough to pay, I'll be back in class by January. Some people never learn. The blood drained from Lauren's face. Her hand lowered slowly, the phone still glowing in her palm. That was it. Not guilt, not remorse, not reconciliation. Just another angle, another manipulation. The letter, the handwriting, the please S and I miss you S. It had all been a play. A well-rehearsed performance for an audience of one. Lauren looked back at the letter on her desk. For a moment, she considered saving it. Maybe as a reminder of how far she'd come. Maybe as proof of just how deep the betrayal had run. Instead, she reached for her lighter. She stepped out onto the back porch of her office, held the letter between 2 fingers, and flicked the flame. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared in a quiet hiss. She watched the ashes scatter into the breeze and felt nothing but clarity. It was snowing lightly outside Lauren's office window, the kind of slow, steady flakes that coated the sidewalks in a quiet hush. She sat alone at her desk, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. A mug of chamomile tea rested beside the latest draft of her statewide expansion contract, a deal that would position her company as one of the most trusted HVAC service providers across the Pacific Northwest. And she had signed it just this morning. She smiled to herself. Not the kind of smile that came from revenge or triumph, but from peace. It had taken a long time to get here. The holiday lights blinked faintly from the corners of the room, and for once she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. There was no ache, no longing to be somewhere else with people who didn't value her. There was just this calm certainty, and her own space built on her own terms. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen since last Christmas. Mom. We miss you. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Let's talk sometime. Lauren stared at the message for a moment. A year ago, that simple line would have unraveled her. She would have wrestled with it for days, torn between the love she once believed was unconditional and the painful truth of how easily her worth had been discarded when she no longer provided a benefit. But now, she took a slow breath, then hit delete. No anger, no sorrow, just a quiet acceptance. The door creaked open and Ginny poked her head in with 2 cups of coffee. I figured you'd still be here, she said, setting one down. Thought you might want the real stuff. Lauren smiled. Thanks. Ginny sat across from her, tilting her head slightly. You know, they still talk. Your parents. They say you overreacted. That you abandoned family. Lauren arched an eyebrow but said nothing. But Ginny continued. No one believes them anymore. Not really. Not after what came out about Sarah Beth. The way she played you. Everyone sees it now, even the ones who used to defend her. Lauren didn't answer at first. She just looked out the window, watching the snow coat the world in white. I used to think walking away meant I lost, she said quietly. Like it was giving up. But now I know better. Ginny nodded, not interrupting. It wasn't giving up. Lauren continued. It was letting go of a weight I never should have been carrying in the first place. And when I did that, I got myself back. The office phone rang in the background. One of her assistants picked up with a cheerful Callaway HVAC. "How can we help you today?" And Lauren smiled to herself again. She had spent so long believing that love had to be earned through sacrifice, that her value was tied to how much she gave away. But not anymore. This Christmas there were no expectations, no guilt, no hollow brunches to fake her way through. Just warmth, clarity, and the undeniable truth that she had built a life no one could take from her. A life that finally belonged to her. Let me know if you'd like me to help you now with video script formatting, narration tone, or publishing strategy. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, for feeling, and maybe even for seeing a little bit of yourself in Lauren's story. You know, we grow up hearing that family is everything. But no one tells you what to do when family only shows up when your wallet's open. When your worth is measured by what you give, not by who you are. Lauren's story isn't just about Thanksgiving or tuition or even betrayal. It's about drawing a line. It's about choosing peace over guilt. And sometimes that means saying no even to the people you were taught never to walk away from. So I want to ask you, have you ever had to set a boundary with family? Have you ever felt like the invisible one? The one who gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left? If so, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell us your story, or just type 1 if this hit home. Let others know they're not alone. Because the more we speak up, the more we remind each other that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And if you found strength or even just a moment of clarity from this story, subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories coming, and I promise they'll keep pulling at the heart just like this one. Until next time, remember, you are not an ATM, you are not disposable, and you are not alone. We'll see you in the next story.